Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel, Girl Gone Crypto. I am really excited to have Yago back on the show to chat about all things sovereign and DeFi for Bitcoin. So, for those who don't know, Edan Yago is a core contributor to Sovryn. So, Yago, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me back. It's fun to be back.
So it's been a little while since we chatted. And so, just for someone who's watching this that maybe isn't familiar with Sovryn, why don't you just kick off by giving us a high level overview of what Sovryn is, and then we can just kind of dive into all of it from there.
Sure. In the beginning, there was Bitcoin, and Bitcoin was this phenomenal new way of transacting value and protecting people's property rights, which existed in the internet and was protected by cryptography instead of violence. And what was amazing about it is that it gave you sovereignty over money. Um, and the problem that I had as a Bitcoiner, and most Bitcoiners have encountered, is like if you want to use it, uh, you need to go through, some lending platform or some exchange. And the first thing that they want from you is all of your personal information, and then the second thing that they want from you is your actual Bitcoin, which they're going to hold for you and keep safe. And for a asset which is designed for you to be able to maintain your privacy and maintain your control, this is a very, very weird idea. Like the fact that when we want to use our Bitcoin, the first thing we need to do is basically give up all of the properties of Bitcoin that are important to us
Right.
is is worse than ironic, right? So what Sovereign is Sovereign's a protocol which extends the functionality of Bitcoin, and it allows Bitcoin to provide for decentralized trading, decentralized lending, basically anything that you would want to do with Bitcoin, you can now do it in a decentralized way. It basically brings all of the decentralization and security assurances of Bitcoin and marries them with the type of smart contracting functionality you have with Ethereum and combines the two to create sort of like the ultimate combination.
So, walk me through exactly how that works. So, let's say that I have Bitcoin on a hardware wallet, and I'm like, I think I would like to start earning some more yields on my Bitcoin and doing certain things while still keeping that custody, like, self custody, like you were talking about. What does it look like to actually use Sovereign, and how would I take that Bitcoin that's sitting on my ledger and plug it into the Sovereign ecosystem?
Yeah, so when I last spoke to you, that would have been pretty complicated because Sovereign was still a very new protocol. But since then, a huge community of contributors has been working on the project um, tirelessly. It's been exhausting, but it's been a labor of love. And so now, if you go to sovryn.app, right, which is sovryn.app, and you take your Trezor or you take your Ledger and you just plug it into your computer, um, it will show you the ability to effectively move your Bitcoin into the sovereign ecosystem, which basically means move it onto a Bitcoin sidechain.
Right.
And at that point, anything that you do through your ledger. So you basically confirm every single transaction. And so when you're trading or when you are borrowing or when you're lending, there's no third party that you're depositing with. The whole thing is happening through your hardware wallet and is confirmed by your hardware wallet and is secured by your hardware wallet. But the experience is becoming, in many ways, even better than a centralized exchange because because to get started, you don't have the whole KYC thing, you don't have the whole registration thing. You literally just go and plug your ledger in.
So, just for someone who's watching, who's maybe trying to, kind of wrap their head around like how you guys are able to do this. And so, obviously, we talked about with centralized exchanges, there's certain, issues in terms of having to KYC and having them, custody your Bitcoin. So, how is it that you guys are able to do this in a completely self custody way? Kind of walk us through maybe how being built on a side chain works, and kind of if you can just kind of like walk us through that piece of things, I think that'd be helpful.
Right. So the fact that it's built on the sidechain, I don't think is the critical part. The
Yeah.
reason the sidechain exists is because what we want is we want the security of Bitcoin And we want to be able to provide and build smart contracts on Bitcoin without having to change Bitcoin core, right? So that Bitcoin forever remains the same reliable system it always has been. And so what we have done is we've used the technology called rootstock, which is this technology for a Bitcoin sidechain. And what you can choose to do is you move your Bitcoin onto the rootstock sidechain. And you can also, we're now integrating Lightning Network. So you can do this with Lightning Network as well. And when you do that, what happens is your Bitcoin goes into a address, which is called a pegged address. And in that pegged address, it is held. And the only way it can be released is by you moving your Bitcoin back onto main chain. And now your Bitcoin, when it moves onto the sidechain, is still controlled by you. It's still controlled by your keys. And now you can start interacting with smart contracts. And what are smart contracts? Smart contracts are just basically programs, right? But the reason they're called smart contracts is because they're a kind of computer program that is not controlled by anyone, that's secured by the blockchain itself. So in this particular case, it's secured by Bitcoin proof of work. And it has a set of instructions, a set of agreements. So for example, let's say I want to trade with you, right? So I say, hey, I've got a Bitcoin. You've got now, I don't know, $65 million. I don't know whatever the price is today. and I'll give you my Bitcoin for all of your millions of dollars. And when we do that, right, it is enforced by the blockchain itself. So you can't back out, I can't back out, and we don't need any exchange. And so what Sovryn does is it provides the smart contracts that allow for that. And it also provides the interface that makes it increasingly easy for regular people to use it. And the goal is, right, the mission of Sovryn is to make it easy for people to be self-sovereign. In other words, to be in control of their money, to be in control of their lives.
So in terms of like what types of tools are available on Sovryn, can you kind of walk us through, like obviously DeFi has been a huge boom, this last year in terms of people being able to earn on their crypto in various ways with staking and yield farming and liquidity pools and all these different things. And so can you kind of walk us through like what types of tools are available on Sovryn?
Yeah, so I think there's basically a few basic functions that people use with DeFi. And there's a whole bunch of different variants, but there's, at least with Sovryn, right, I think the focus has been on replicating, at least, as the first step, those core functions that people are using centralized systems to do, right? So that's trading, it's margin trading, it's perpetual swaps, which is coming to testnet probably in about 4 or 5 weeks. And it's lending and borrowing. It's basically ways in which you can trade and which you can earn. And then there's also yield farming, which is a way that you can become an owner of the protocol, because the protocol has a governance system. That governance system is controlled by the community through a token called SOV. And it also, the protocol also earns money on every single trade or on lending. And so the SOV token holders can earn those funds by staking. Right, so you can stake, and also by participating or providing liquidity to the system. In other words, facilitating the liquidity that other people need to trade, you can also earn SOV tokens, so that the community become the owners of the protocol. And so those core things, trading, derivatives, lending, and then also the ability to govern the system and earn governance tokens, those are the core components right now of Sovryn.
So I'm glad you brought up the SOV token, because that's kind of where I wanted to go next, because obviously we've talked a lot about Bitcoin and the various tools that you guys are enabling, how that works. But you guys do, like you said, have the SOV token as well. And so can you kind of walk us through a few aspects of that, such as, kind of the role it plays in the ecosystem? I know you just kind of mentioned, touched on that a little bit, but even I know before we started recording, we were talking a little bit about how it was set up to be decentralized. And so give us kind of a walkthrough of the SOV token.
Right. So one interesting thing about Sovryn is Sovryn has primarily been started by people who come from a Bitcoin focus, right? Bitcoiners. And Bitcoiners are interested in security, they're interested in self-sovereignty, and by and large, they tend to be not interested in other cryptocurrencies. And so I think the first thing to understand about Sovereign is it's not a competing cryptocurrency. It's not designed to be a currency. The primary, in fact, the only currency you ever really need to have to use Sovereign is Bitcoin, right? You pay your fees in Bitcoin, and you can use USDT, or you can trade ETH, or you can go short BNB, or whatever it is that you want to do. But the only thing you ever really need is Bitcoin. So what is SOV? SOV is the coordination token for the community. It's what allows for governance, and it's also what allows for people who are acting as validators to secure the system. But its most important function, right, is this function of governing the system. When you're building a system like Sovereign, you're not building something like Bitcoin. Bitcoin is designed to be a extremely simple and uniform rule set. It's designed to be the perfect money, right? And money, in order to be perfect, must be unchanging, right? If people can start manipulating money, then we're just back to fiat.
Right.
On the other hand, the perfect exchange, right, or the perfect lending system is not designed to be unchanging. That would be bad, right? You want it to be able to improve over time. And that's why when you're building a system which is designed to provide for applications, right, the use of money, as opposed to just being money, you want there to be a way for the community to govern it, control it, improve it on an ongoing basis. And you also want to be able to incentivize them to do it in a way where they are going to, one, never have a central party that is in control, and two, that they're going to be thinking of the long-term benefit of the project rather than some kind of short-term manipulation. Right. So the way Sovereign accomplishes this is there's now almost 13,000 SOV, not holders, there's way more SOV holders, but there's now 13,000 SOV stakers. These are people who have given up the liquidity of their SOV by locking it in a smart contract in order to gain the right of voting. And some of them have locked it up for as much as 3 years. And why have they locked it up for 3 years? Because the longer you lock it up for, the more voting power you have, and also the more of the system revenue you get. It's kind of like instead of with Bitcoin, you've got mining. Here you've got vote mining, right? You mine votes by locking up your funds, by paying a cost to lock up your funds for as long as possible, and you get rewarded for doing this. And the genius, I think, Aurora and Jamie who developed this idea, the genius of it is that, if you think about like a company that is like a public company, it's often got a very, very short-term focus, right? Let's make it whatever the price go up for the next quarter, or let's try and get the CEO the biggest possible bonus. Here, the people who have the most influence are the people who are thinking for the longest term, because they're locked up for 3 years. And so it's a very, very elegant way of using the programmability to create something which isn't like a share or an equity, but is can be much more well designed to provide for good governance.
So just to kind of wrap things up, I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you guys are currently working on, what the team is really excited about. Obviously, a lot has happened since the last time we spoke earlier this summer. And so I can only imagine a few months from now, again, there'll just be a whole nother, conversation worth of things. But give us a little glimpse into what's kind of coming next for Sovryn and what people can expect.
Right. So I think last time we spoke was April, which in Sovryn terms is ancient history. I think at the time there was about $20 million in the system. Today, the system manages well over $1 billion. There's in active TVL well over $150 million. There's millions of dollars traded on the system every single day. It's probably the fastest growing part of the Bitcoin ecosystem because DeFi is such a strong and important fit for Bitcoin. But there's been so many crazy, amazing things that have happened as well. Like just a couple of weeks ago, it was announced that banks in El Salvador would begin looking to integrate and start using Sovryn. And I think, what they're interested in is lending and borrowing of the Bitcoin that they have. And also one of the key things that Sovryn is bringing which is Bitcoin-backed stablecoins. So Bitcoin-backed stablecoins already exist in the Sovryn ecosystem. A new sort of improved way of doing them is going to be launching in a few weeks. And what that does is it means that now anyone who holds Bitcoin has a way to compete with the Fed directly. You don't have to wait for the Fed. You can create your own dollars, which aren't brr money, but they're bit money.
Right.
And then one of the other cool things which is about to happen is that there's a team that have been working on a part of the protocol, which is called a sub protocol called Zero, which is going to allow people with Bitcoin to borrow against their Bitcoin at zero interest. Basically, you can borrow forever. And the idea is to create an infinite hodl. So you have Bitcoin and you never need to sell it because you can pay your rent by borrowing against it and you never need to worry about paying interest. And so I think, Sovryn is, in some ways, a game changer in terms of how you can think about Bitcoin, because it allows you to use your Bitcoin without going through intermediaries. But it also means that you never have to sell Bitcoin ever again, because you can create Bitcoin-backed stablecoins and you can borrow against Bitcoin at 0% interest. Now, there's a whole bunch of other cool stuff that is coming to Sovryn, but those are some of the things that have just happened over the last few months.
No, that's really exciting. And actually, let's dive into that just a little bit more too. And so, let's say that someone they have their Bitcoin, but they need to pay their rent. Kind of walk us through how that actually works and how they turn that kind of like borrowing, lending process into fiat, so they can pay their rent.
Cool. Yeah. So for example, if I want to pay my rent right today, what I would usually have to do is either go to a centralized service and borrow against my Bitcoin. Don't want to do that. Or I would have to sell my Bitcoin. I definitely don't want to do that. Right. So here I could put $10,000 of Bitcoin in and borrow, $2,000 a month until I needed to borrow some more. And as the price of Bitcoin goes up, I may be able to borrow with that one Bitcoin my entire year or several years worth of rent. And in fact, because the price of Bitcoin does over time go up, I actually can pay off my loan just by the increase in value in my Bitcoin. But it really gets better than that, because, we are a culture of renters, but a lot of people would like to own a house, right?
Right.
So one of the things that is being worked on is the ability to use this to create Bitcoin-backed mortgages. And so you could imagine that you want to buy a house, right? So you don't want to, the bank's not going to accept your Bitcoin as collateral. So you need to do it yourself. So you go to Sovryn, which is the only platform which, is permissionless. So you can just do it yourself and you borrow against your Bitcoin. And you can do that on Sovryn, but you can't do it on, say, like Nexo or Celsius, because they're going to charge you, 6%, 8% a year. Here, you're getting better rates than the bank, which would charge you 2% or 3% a year. So you can, borrow against your Bitcoin. You put down the deposit for your house. Then you can borrow the rest of the money or just buy a house outright. But the cool thing is, and this is like one of the things that I've been playing with, the idea of doing is, against my Bitcoin, I borrow money, I buy a house, but now I go to the bank and I say, listen, bank, I have a house. Would you like to give me a mortgage? And the bank, because I already have a house, could give me a mortgage. So I get a mortgage and I buy more Bitcoin.
Insert evil laugh. But no, seriously, that's awesome. I mean, that's so interesting. So I guess one question I have is, like, how is it that you guys are able to allow people to borrow against their Bitcoin without any fees when all of these other platforms are charging fees? How is it that you guys are able to do that?
All right. So it's not, there are fees. There's an origination fee. There's a fee that you are charged when you create the loan. And that's because you're paying a protocol, right? But the logic of the system is different. It doesn't have to work like one of these centralized services, because the system is able to do what banks do. And what a bank does when it gives you a loan is it doesn't go into its vault and find, $100,000. It literally creates those $100,000 out of nowhere. It holds your property as a asset, and the loan it writes as a liability. So it gives you money that didn't exist before. Well, we have the perfect asset, the best asset. We have Bitcoin. And so the protocol, on the basis of the Bitcoin, can create a new loan in Bitcoin-backed stablecoins and give that to you. So how does the system make money? It makes money off the origination fee, but it also allows people to take out risky loans if they want. And the reason the system can allow people to take out risky loans is because those loans are always guaranteed by Bitcoin. And so if they aren't able to pay back the loan, or if their position gets liquidated, the system actually makes money, right? And so in a way, the system is designed to allow responsible people to take long-term loans, which are non-risky, right? Where they have a high degree of collateral, where they don't even need to think about it forever. And it allows people who have a higher risk appetite to take potentially short-term, very risky loans in order to lever up or take a long position on something. And if they get it wrong, well, they're paying the system, they're paying the protocol, and they're making it possible for everyone else to do it. So that's how it's able to do it.
Awesome. Yago, this has been such a fun conversation. It's always great to chat with you. And it has been so cool to watch the explosion of Sovryn since, like you said, last April when we chatted. And so I know there's a lot of people in this, a lot of Bitcoiners that are excited to have these kinds of tools available for their Bitcoin. And so thank you again, Yago, so much for coming on the show and taking the time to chat with us all today. And so if someone's watching this and they want to check out Sovryn, where's the next best place for them to go?
Well, the best place to go is probably sovryn.app. And you just click on app, or you just click directly into live.sovryn, sovryn.app. There are also a bunch of other front ends, but that's the most popular one. You can also follow Sovryn on Twitter. So it's sovrynbtc, Sovryn Bitcoin, Sovryn BTC. And you can follow me as well. I tend to tweet a lot about Sovryn. I'm becoming a little bit boring on Twitter in that way. So I'm Edan, Edan Yago, Yago.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for coming on the show. This has been such a great conversation. I really appreciate it.
All right, awesome. Thanks for having me, and I hope you'll invite me on again sometime.